Well, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in this world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap today, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be receiving a link to the event afterwards in an email that you could access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if you have a question at any time during the presentation, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. And we should have about 10 or 15 minutes near the end of the presentation, and we'll go through those audience questions. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Trilio for Red Hat OpenStack, the missing link for cloud-native data protection. Our speakers today are Boaz Michaely, Director of Product Management for Trilio, and Sean Cohen, Senior Manager of Product Management for Red Hat. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Charlene. Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to host today Boaz from Trilio, a Red Hat Foundation partner, to discuss how you can protect your cloud workloads in OpenStack. Boaz, thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So probably my first question for you will be, who is Trilio?
Well, simply stated, Trilio provides the only cloud-native data protection solution for OpenStack. And as we recently announced, we will soon support Red Hat virtualization as well. Do we really need to introduce Red Hat?
Well, as many of you already know, Red Hat is the world's leading provider of open source solutions. Our platform makes it easier to build, manage, operate an open hybrid cloud infrastructure. This month, we're actually releasing our 13th version of Red Hat OpenStack platform.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So by now, we're seeing OpenStack being adopted by various sectors. Not only financial services and telco, as our webinar audience are probably aware, but also managed service providers, manufacturing, healthcare, and enterprise around the globe. In fact, what we found over the year, Buzz, is that customers are looking to realize operational cost benefits by serving both their cloud-native stateless workloads as well as their traditional, more stateful application workloads on the same cloud infrastructure.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's exactly what we're seeing on our end, too.
And if you want to get to the root of it, this is a transformation process, right, that you take for years. Just to give you some examples, the telco digital transformation journey into virtual network functions brings together typically heavily invested legacy functions with newly developed ones under the same framework. So they're using the same cloud infrastructure, in this case OpenStack, but they're basically transitioning from what used to be like a hardware-based equipment that served like a single function, like a switch or a DNS server, et cetera, as they're now rewriting their application to be more cloud native. Right?
Yeah, so and they have a ton of investment already, behind them.
Yeah. So our latest Red Hat OpenStack survey actually offers more insights into what workloads people are running in their cloud. Out of 670 Red Hat OpenStack platform customers that we've surveyed across, believe it or not, 78 countries. The top 5 results, as you can all see, are balance between infrastructure services, such as public and private cloud services, software development, testing, QE, as well as CI work, alongside the network functions, as I mentioned, like the VNFs, telco VNFs, part of the NFV workloads, and the typical web services, e-commerce databases for supporting application frameworks, right? But the most interesting data pattern we've learned using the survey, that actually we repeated, the previous one was 2 years ago, is that 63% of the respondents indicated that they're running a mix of both existing traditional workloads and new workloads in their cloud.
Yeah, and to clarify, Sean, the traditional workloads differ from the new cloud-native workloads, mostly in how they treat data. So cloud-native is all about disposable, stateless apps, whereas traditional workloads carry their data, and guess what? They require data protection, and hence the missing link.
Right. So we're seeing the need to run and protect traditional workloads, what one would typically refer to as pet applications, right? That maintain state and persistency over native workloads that are not persistent. Um, at this point, I actually would like to invite our webinar audience to share some of their own observations, and we prepared a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, so we've got two polls for the audience today. I'm going to go ahead and push the first one out right now. The question is, what type of applications are most important for you to protect in your cloud platform? You can select one of the following: CRM, HR, financial systems, virtual network functions, homegrown apps, or that ubiquitous other. So go ahead and make your selection. We'll give the audience a couple more seconds to go ahead and get their selection in, and then we'll take a look at those poll results. And we are at about 35 seconds. So while we're waiting, I do want to remind the audience, if you have a question at any time during the event, please feel free to use your control panel and submit your questions. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this first poll here. Take a look at the results. Oh, what happened there? There we go. Okay. All right, so there looks like the results are 56%. The majority of folks are using say financial systems are most important for protection in their cloud platform. That's that seems right about right. What do you guys think about these results?
So, Boaz, so this is not a coincidence. We see like financial services systems actually can be broken into two. In fact, this can be both already a new cloud native workload, but it can also reflect more legacy and traditional workloads. As you can see, we have a good balance between NFV and homegrown applications. And it's interesting, but if you think about it, homegrown applications actually more fall into cloud native as well. So
yeah, I'd say, you know what, we have obviously a small poll here, but this absolutely meets what we're seeing in the field. Financial systems are all over OpenStack. This is perfectly in line with what we're seeing.
All right.
Well, let's go to the second one then.
All right, great. Let's see, the second poll should be popping up on your screen here right now. Which database platforms do you use to run these applications? You have a couple choices there: Oracle, MS SQL, MySQL / MariaDB, MongoDB, or again, other. So go ahead and make your selection, and we'll take a look at those poll results as soon as we get a majority here. And as I said before, don't be shy about using that control panel to submit your questions. And hopefully we'll have a really, really nice interaction with the audience later on after we get through the presentation. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share the results. Looks like we've got the majority actually, the largest percentage running on Oracle. But nothing's running on MongoDB. That's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah. No, it's not actually surprising. The list was in the order really that we anticipated. So this is
okay.
definitely in line. So we've attested that the audience is normal, right? We've got
Congratulations,
really
audience. You're normal.
Representation here.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that all of us will agree that Oracle will be the first one to come to hand as running in a cloud native application, right? It's more the traditional workload that we see running, right? So it validates basically what we've seen in our larger survey. So probably you can go back to the Reddit survey at this point. And I have a question for you.
Thank you everyone for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your inputs as well. So, Boaz, we've seen what type of workloads are running in our clouds, right? And as a cloud operator and as a tenant running these workloads, why do I need to be concerned with data protection? Doesn't the cloud resiliently protect me already?
Yeah, that's really the crux of the matter. So everyone wants to believe that their workloads are safe in the cloud, even in a private cloud environment, because the cloud has built-in redundancy and high availability. And so while that is true from the infrastructure perspective, by the way, only if configured accordingly. Things could still go wrong at the application level. And there, without a proper solution, the tenant is just left helpless, especially in a cloud environment.
Mm-hmm. So what can go wrong? Can you give me some examples?
So what can go wrong, right? Like, could anything go wrong? And it's not very different from what we're used to. We can talk about two categories of data disasters in this industry, and it's usually referred to as data damage and data loss. So under data damage, I may have full access to my application data, and yet it may be useless in its current form. Most of us have experienced that scenario at one time or another. It could be a database that was corrupted, a document that was deleted or overwritten. And we're not immune to viruses or ransomware in the cloud either. A software upgrade, that's another form of potential data damage if you think about it. And you roll a software upgrade, it goes bad. What do you do? And businesses must be able to quickly roll back if an upgrade goes wrong. And then, especially in the cloud, the tenant workloads are even further exposed to additional risk from the admin side, as an entire VM or data volume may be deleted by an admin, or the cloud configuration may change. So all of those concern data damage, and you need to be able to go back to a working, healthy point in time. And then there's data loss. And what we mean by that is that's a situation where you have no access to your data. It could be that your data system itself has been permanently destroyed by one of these fantastic events on the slide there, or it could be you're temporarily unable to reach it. The result is the same. The business is disrupted by loss of data. Mm-hmm. And again, to recover from all these types of events, you require backup. You need access to a healthy, recoverable point in time. In fact, to further protect against a geographic disaster, you really need all of these data copies to also be replicated to your remote location. In fact, when using Red Hat Ceph storage as the S3 target with Trilio, the entire bucket is replicated. It's eventually consistent on the other side, and it contains all the points in time, which allows you to recover on the remote side just as easily as you recover on the local side. And to say again, I cannot stress this too much. What makes things more challenging for cloud operators is that tenants must be able to recover from these disasters on their own. And that ability, again, is a missing link in OpenStack today.
Indeed. Basically, anything can go wrong with your data in your data center, but can also go wrong in a cloud, right? So in fact, you touch a few cloud unique backup and recovery challenges. Does the cloud also present additional challenges or opportunities when talking about data protection in a wider sense?
That's a really important conversation because data protection has really expanded in the last few years way beyond just backup and recovery. We definitely see additional use cases that people want to leverage the same investment. And in the cloud specifically, these are even more important. So let me elaborate. The first use case is the data reuse. This is where you do more with your backup copy and your workload environment. And the most popular example is test and dev, where a copy is used to bring in realistic production data into QA. Another is machine learning. You have fresh data. You already have that as a copy in your backup. Now you can use that copy to train machine learning. Scan for threats is an example. One of our customers actually uses the backup copies in a non-disruptive way to run offline vulnerability scans on that data.
Mm-hmm. I see you've included the analytics use case. We've seen mobile carriers looking at to perform analytics on voice service records, for example, on a different cloud region, basically extending the data protection to analytics, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And that's all these use cases really valuable in the cloud. Here is where the second use case is workload mobility. That's almost unique in the way that this comes to play. So think about those examples. If you're migrating from one OpenStack distribution to another, how useful it is to be able to migrate an entire operating workload. Your data, your application, everything comes to life. The second example is the out-of-band cloud upgrade, where currently the upgrades may not always go that easily. I'm sure our audience has got a share of that pain. And in many cases, people choose to stand up a new cloud version first. And now you want the ability to migrate working live workloads from your previous cloud into the new one as fast as you can. And then there's load balancing as an example across several clouds, and even migrating between clouds. Even think about migrating from your private cloud to a public. This whole conversation about hybrid cloud, this is where all the workload mobility plays in. And again, not to overstress this, but the expectation is for tenants to get self-service for all of that. This stands true for both these additional two use cases as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, Buzz. So all of this plays well into the cloud model, right? And where the operators need to protect their workloads in order to maintain their service level assurance and restore from data damage or loss. You mentioned, for example, the tenant aspects of it as well. One of the examples I can think of is like a telco cloud provider that typically has a carrier grade 5 nines, right? Can translate to 5.26 minutes a year. That has a direct impact on their data protection recovery point objective as well as their recovery time objective, what's known as RPO and RTO.
Oh, exactly, and we saw even in the survey, and it's no surprise, NFV is the thing. OpenStack is the de facto standard for NFV infrastructure, and in that regard, I heard this a lot in the last two summits. Some people have the perception that NFVs are always cloud native. And in reality, they sometimes are, but not always. And that's the feedback we're getting from the telcos. We, as you mentioned, Sean, we're seeing legacy functions being wrapped up in the NFV framework along the new VNF. So these are persistent applications that consume storage directly from Cinder, as we can see in this diagram. And that's one. And the other, again, as I mentioned, is the rollback. And specifically for NFV, the ability to roll back an NFV is a very valuable one. When you do it from the VNF perspective, it can take longer and be more complex.
All right. So, Boaz, as you mentioned before, data protection itself is a mature and advanced market. What's so exciting about the Trilio solution? What is so unique about it?
I thought you'd never ask. So Trilio stands out for two reasons. First, we are the only OpenStack native solution in the market, and I want to elaborate what that really means. Fundamentally, Trilio Vault is designed as a built-in OpenStack service. So it's fully integrated using the OpenStack APIs and user interface. And as I go from the left side to the right here on the slide, it is agentless, requires no installation and guests, taking up no resources from the guest. It's multi-tenant in every aspect that OpenStack itself is. We empower tenants with complete self-service, which again is key for cloud operators. And then it's a very efficient solution. We capture only change blocks in an incremental forever fashion. At the same time, we leverage the KVM native QCOW2 format to provide synthetically full images. And the architecture scales with OpenStack itself. I think we'll have a chance to even see what that looks like later. It is non-disruptive both during the installation as well as during operation. We leverage Cinder snaps for that to take the load off of the production. And finally, it's integrated into OpenStack at multiple levels for seamless authentication and user experience. Now, with that integration, we also communicate with the other OpenStack services, and this brings me to the second point where we stand out, which is that Trilio Vault backs up and restores entire workloads. It's not just the cylinder volume, which you can do today and script around that. We capture everything that is needed in order to restore a complete tenant environment to exactly the way it was at the given point in time. And this includes quiescing the application, storing the glance image, collecting the virtual machine data, the networking configuration, storage information, security information, availability zone, and additional cloud metadata. And then, of course, the data itself, and that includes the boot disk and the block volumes. And on top of all these capabilities, Sean, we are religious about simplicity. Mm-hmm. From installation through backup to recovery, everything is made easy. And that's really what makes us stand out where legacy solutions simply, don't meet the cloud needs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But let me, though, by the same token, at Trilio, we are hearing a lot of great feedback about Red Hat and about this partnership, and our customers are really excited about that. So why do you think that is?
Well, Trilio fits very well with the Red Hat open hybrid cloud architecture. If you look, you mentioned your product basically addresses a missing link in workloads data protection for OpenStack based clouds. And if you look, some of the touch points that you basically address. So, and you mentioned, for example, the workloads mobility, right, as a topic and as a use case. One of the things using Red Hat Open Hybrid Cloud, we basically would like to allow customers to do is exactly that. Mm-hmm. Avoid vendor locking to begin with, and ability to move between footprints, right? So Trilio is well integrated to OpenStack platform, as you saw, but you also now integrated with our virtualization stack. You are now working to integrate with our management platform suite, which is CloudForms, right? Sure. That we use. And you also tightly integrated to Ceph. And probably one of the questions I have for you is can you share more information about your tight integration into Ceph?
Oh, sure. I mean, we're actually optimized to use Ceph using the Diff API. And we're, of course, Red Hat OpenStack certified. And we're also Ceph. We've certified Ceph S3 as a target. So absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So now we're getting a bit technical. Can you see maybe a quick demo before we leave ourselves in all of this technology?
Sure, let's do that. For the sake of time, usually we do this live, but I'm actually going to go through a recorded version so that we're time boxed here. So let me pop that up.
Thank you.
And bring it over to the screen. And let's just go full mode here.
All right, so This is, I recognize this screen, right? This is the Red Hat OpenStack platform dashboard.
Exactly. So I'm logged into the OpenStack platform, and as I click, so we can see here the backups tab at the tenant level, and that was created when Trilio was installed. And here we see the workloads, and these are really, think about them as your backup jobs. To create a workload as a tenant, let's say I need to protect my database. All I do is I select VMs which are not already protected. I determine the schedule, starting date, end date, and how often I want the copies. This is my RPO, say 4 hours. And the retention policy, how many copies to keep before I turn around in days. Now, optionally, I can create application-consistent workloads where I'll pause the VM and quiesce the application. So let's go into one of these workloads that's already been running for a while, the 2-hour gold RPO workload, and take a look at the snapshots here. So I've mentioned how we are incremental. That means the oldest copy is full, obviously, but after that, everything is incremental and we only store the changes. Now, popping into one of these snapshots, here's where we can see really all the information that's in the workload. I mean, there's more information than that, just that. Security groups, flavors, networks of each one of the VMs in the workload, the data itself, the boot volume, the Ceph volume, or Cinder, right? So all that information is there, and that's really how easy it is to create a backup. Now the question is, how do you use those backups, as we talked about? And there are really 4 ways to do that. The first and easiest one is one-click restore. You get everything back into production exactly the way it was. Now, in-place restore is a more fine-grained solution where you can, instead of recovering the entire VM, you use the existing VM and just restore selective volumes, whether it's boot or your data volume, into those existing VMs. Going even more granular is selective restore, and this is the way to get, into those test and dev kind of use cases. So here I can control anything I need to. I can map those networks into the networks that I have right now. I can map the volume types. So I'm not going to use Ceph for this workload. And for any instance, I'll probably want to rename that so it doesn't clash with an existing one. I can change the flavor. I can change the availability zone and even the storage availability zone if I had one configured. And then, of course, you can select which VMs are going to participate in that restore. Now, the 4th way is to mount. We've talked about how our copies are mountable, and we also offer this really powerful preview in order to help us decide. So I can choose any snap, any VM in this workload, and do a search for a file pattern. I'm going to trim this down to 2 snaps just for the sake of time and search for all the files at the root level. And this search is live on the copy. I've obviously cut it down for the demo. And I get a list of all those files across the points in time. So here I can compare permissions changed, size that's changed, anything that's really changed that stands out that will now help me figure out which point in time I actually want to go ahead and mount. Now, in order to mount, we also deliver built-in a server that we call the File Recovery Manager. When I mount that point in time, I gain access into kind of an explorer view. Mm-hmm. If I SSH into this from my production, I can copy anything that I need. Basically. It's a selective file, folder. I can really get any information that I need at that level. So moving on from what the tenant can do to also the administrator view, mm-hmm. is you get the things that you expect, right? So as a backup admin, I have this capability, again, that pops up in my environment. With a dashboard at the top, at the bottom, I get granular control for all my workloads with information and even on and off control information. And all of this additional information that we don't have to go into, whether it's audit trail, I can control the policy. So I may not want to allow all my tenants to create a copy every 4 hours. Maybe they're not paying full fee.
And this is where you also define your retention policies, et cetera?
Well, the retention policies were actually
in the workload here. Basically,
this is where you can change a policy. And here's where I can get usage data. So very important for chargeback inside the organization.
That was my next question.
Right.
Yeah.
And detailed information into how they're using it. You can even download that report into an Excel. So that makes it really usable. So I know that was a bit of a breeze there, but that's really what I had for you in terms of a demo.
Quite impressive, Boaz. It's amazing how native Trilio has been integrated into OpenStack platform. I think our customers that are regular to use the Red Hat OpenStack dashboard, this seems to be very native and built in. So very good. And probably my next question will be, how do you do it all, right?
Well, this is where we get nitty gritty, right? So let's talk architecture. We've already mentioned how Trilio is really a service. Think about it really as a service inside of OpenStack. And if this is your OpenStack, you have your control layer, your compute layer, and your storage layer. When you install Trilio, you get the following components. First is the Trilio service itself. That's the Trilio Vault runs as a high availability cluster. It registers just like any other service with the API point. And then we install a lightweight service at every compute node that's called the data mover. So all the logic is in the Trilio Vault service. And here the key is to have access from every compute node to the source and to the target. For target, we support NFS, Swift, S3 that we announced recently, very valuable for Ceph. And so by that, the lift and shift is really done locally, and that's the optimal way to do that, as well as you can understand by this why we're scalable, because we don't have additional footprint. We scale with the cloud itself. If we go one step deeper, and where is all the information coming from? We talked about that. This is where we integrate it with all the other services. We talked to Neutron to collect the security and networking and availability zone information. We talked to Nova to collect the VM flavors and the metadata, with Cinder for the volume configuration and volume types. We also capture the VM images from Gland. And of course, the incremental data capture that we talked about.
Can you go one back slide?
Sure.
So what I really like here is that Trilio approach is not just focused on the VM, right? What used to be like a virtualization use case only in a hypervisor. So you typically see that you back up the VM configuration. So if it's the network, storage, etc. Here, what you've done, you went a few layers deeper into what I, as a cloud operator, will need in order to back up and restore. And the fact that you're taking with the VM, with the application workloads backup, its security information, the availability zone. So if I want to restore my data in a different region or a different zone or a different site for that matter, this is very relevant. You have all the properties, if you will,
exactly right,
of the workload. So that's quite amazing. And even the volume types. For example, one of the things we're seeing is if you restore it, you not necessarily would like to use that specific volume type, or you want to be. You want to know what storage tier that workload needs to be restored to, right? So it's more the cloud aspect of it, and I really like it.
Yeah, thank you. Good feedback. And again, this is where we stand out. Now, if you want to dive one step deeper into what a backup operation actually looks like and the touch points, well, let's talk about a full backup and an incremental, and this will give people a good sense of what's going on. So this is, again, your control, compute, and storage layer, and the target is on the right-hand side. So first thing, when a backup job starts, we trigger, again, if you chose to have an application consistent, we trigger a VM snap freeze through QEMU, and that is where people will put their scripts to actually talk to their applications. So it's not only a VM file system quiz, it goes all the way into the application for application consistency.
Going back to our poll survey, we did this one.
Oracle,
so if you're using Oracle, this is where you invoke the Oracle hot backup mode?
Exactly, and this is where we already have certified scripts for all these applications that we saw there. Now the application is frozen, we snap through Cinder into Ceph, and we thaw the application continues to work. This whole thing is very quick. Now this is again, we talked about our integration point with Ceph. We work with Cinder, but when Ceph is there, it's even better because Ceph itself has a rich API and helps us identify only blocks that are interesting, like no zero block. So now we create a snap, we create a volume from that snap, and we, as I said before, with the data mover, all we have to do now is lift and shift and store it as a QCOW image on the target.
So just to verify, when you do a backup today of a Ceph, underneath Cinder for that matter, you go one layer deeper, you only going to be able to protect that blocks that have changed, right?
Exactly right. We only need, so we have the full image, but we don't actually need to send mirror image because
even if I do a full backup process, you're utilizing the Ceph incremental API. Basically.
It's usually the Ceph intelligence, even at the full, it becomes more valuable in the next step. So of course we clean up after that and we leave the last snapshot for reference. When we come back again, next time, freeze, snap, thaw, now we let Ceph calculate the differences. So now we get a snap from Ceph, which represents only those differences. And again, it's very easy for us to move only those blocks and then capture that in the QCOW2 image, which was built exactly to do that. That means that all those points in time, it's a chain. And whenever you look at any one of those points in time, it's a fully, so it's a synthetic full point in time using QCOW, and you can just mount it. And that's exactly what we do there. I think that's what we had in terms of architecture.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So I want to thank you a lot. And again, probably now will be a good time for us to do a quick summary and then let people know where they can find more information about everything just seen today.
Sure, and yeah, just clean up there on the animation. So just to recap what we talked about, and really appreciate the opportunity here, Sean, is this is Trilio. We're the only native solution for OpenStack. We provide backup of data and the entire workload. You can recover into your existing environment, new environments. You can take that data, you own it. Mm-hmm. So it's QCOW, open format. Take that data wherever you need to, whether it's another cloud. With S3, for example, you can store directly into Amazon. Now you've seeded your data in the public cloud. You saw how easy it is to manage it on a tenant level, self-service. Again, self-service, this is what cloud is all about, as well as full capabilities for the admin to manage and do their job. We talked about the fantastic relationship with Red Hat. We are a certified Connect partner. We've already certified Red Hat OpenStack 10. We're coming up with Red Hat OpenStack Platform 13 pretty soon. We've certified Red Hat Ceph Storage as the S3 target. And we've already announced at the Red Hat Summit just last month about our support coming up for Red Hat Director, for Red Hat Cloud Forms. We actually showed a demo of that working. Mm-hmm. And this is very exciting. Since we announced this, the Trilio Vault for Red Hat virtualization is coming up. We've been bombarded with interest. So this is going to be a very powerful addition where you can protect both OpenStack and Rev, and you've got Cloud Forms on top of it, and think about migrating workloads from one side to another, mm-hmm. and all the goodness that you saw here in OpenStack, same kind of architecture, protecting entire workloads at a Rev infrastructure as well.
Excellent. So I really like to see that the director support is coming up. Director, for those of you who doesn't know, is our deployment and lifecycle tool for OpenStack. What it means, you'll be able to, if I read it correctly, to deploy Trilio out of the box when you deploy our OpenStack.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
We're talking with the Red Hat team, and we're bringing upstream as needed, so this will be seamless.
Excellent. So you actually answered one of the questions I've seen raised already during the webinar, which is what versions of OpenStack do you support? Let me just read one more question, then I'll hand it over to Charlene.
And we do actually too. So to expand, we support everything up to 10, or Red Hat OpenStack 10, Newton, Okata. So next is coming up Pike and Queens. Those will be our next versions. This will be, of course, containerized with Red Hat OpenStack 13.
Excellent.
That's very important.
Let me go to the next question. You mentioned the upcoming OpenStack releases, how Trilio can help with upgrades. I think you touched a bit the role of upgrades, and as things can go wrong, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen it where, like, when we discussions, things can go wrong. How from what you've seen, how can, when you do upgrades, where this can come along and be handy?
And that's, again, what we're saying is you're embarking on an adventure. You're starting to upgrade your cloud. What happens when things go wrong? We all know things go wrong. Mm-hmm. With Trilio, as you're going through that upgrade process, it really makes a ton of sense to get a copy of a working environment. So again, people are using it in different ways. One is, all right, if something goes wrong, I can go back. So that means you probably have a way to roll back the cloud. But now, okay, what happens then? How do you get all your workloads running? So that's why it's important to back up at the workload level. Another is to migrate the workloads. So you do that kind of offline upgrade. You upgrade on the side. By this ability, this is very unique because otherwise, if you have a new cloud, how do you get all your applications? You have to redeploy everything. That doesn't fit. Mm-hmm. With Trilio, you can actually migrate over. And now you can use your new cloud and decommission the old version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first of all, what I'm hearing, there's like a best practice, right? Always do backup. You don't even know when you need it. There's obviously when it comes to infrastructure, the Red Hat OpenStack platform does provide the infrastructure backup capabilities, but you always want to have the workload level. And going back to what we discussed earlier, the ability to protect the metadata, availability zones, security gaps, all that is very applicable. So it's good to have. So that was the.
Yeah, no, in fact, there's obviously an effort going on for fast forward from 10 to 13. Mm-hmm. That's being worked up upstream. Were some interesting conversations in the summit around that. And definitely, as soon as we certify 13, that is going to become a powerful tool as part of that upgrade process to use Trilio there.
So as you do cloud infrastructure upgrades, obviously, you want to look at all aspects, infrastructure, as well as the workloads, so you have a complete picture, pretty much, right? To replace. Very good. Charlene, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we've gotten a couple questions in from the audience, which I am happy to go through, but I do first want to remind the audience that if you have a question, it's not too late to get it in, just use your control panel. And let's go ahead and dive right on in. The first question is, let's see, it is, how does this relate to the freezer project? Is it a commercial iteration of it?
That's, thank you for that question. So freezer is, let me actually take you back to how Trilio was born. So Trilio was born from an OpenStack project that was called Rackshaw. And our CTO, Merle, was there leading this effort, and where at the time, the community did not have the energy or the will or the vision to understand how backups are important for OpenStack to invest. And his vision was that this will become a necessity in order for OpenStack to go prime. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. In order to turn that project into a real working product that required investment, and that's what he did, went and launched this company. And you know, we're seeing today how powerful and how true that vision was. Rackshaw was that type of full workload, tenant operated, get back what we're seeing here today. Freezer has a different scope. Freezer is more associated with the data itself, and at the same time, Freezer is not receiving significant attention. So it also remains in a state where it has limited usefulness.
Yeah. So Freezer, just to complement what Boaz was saying, is not a supported project in Red Hat OpenStack platform today. It has a lot of good use cases it covers. It was born actually at the HP Helium days. But as Boaz indicated, there's no strong community behind it, and it lacks a lot of features. It doesn't go anywhere close in the level of depth of integration we saw coming from Trilio.
All right, great. The next question, what about backup of the Red Hat OpenStack platform itself?
I can see that question. I can read it out.
Okay, great. So
people are asking about the backup of the Red Hat OpenStack platform itself. Backup and recovery of under cloud and over cloud control plane integrity, etc., in conjunction with workload backups. So Sean, do you want to maybe first talk about how people can do that and what their options are to protect the cloud itself?
So as I mentioned, the OpenStack platform itself has a long-time capability of performing automated on-the-cloud backup when it comes to backing up the control plane. With OSP 13, we'll be basically releasing, as Boaz mentioned, our new feature that allows customers to do fast forward upgrades between long life releases, in this case OSP 10 to 13. As part of that work, we have automated the using Ansible, basically the control plane backup. What will be interesting going forward, now that this is coming up in the platform level itself, and as you saw, Trilio being integrated into OpenStack platform very tightly, CloudForm very tightly, etc. I think the nature thing, we'll see how we can connect all the dots to provide that end-to-end picture, as I mentioned earlier. But obviously, from technical point of view, I think all the building blocks are on the table. So that's a very good question and probably a good requirement behind it to protect the overall cloud infrastructure, including data, etc.
And from our side, that question comes up almost every time. Mm-hmm. Now, protecting the cloud is a bit of a different conversation. It's something like, for example, Sean, what you talked about, where Red Hat is deeply involved. At the same time, Trilio also helps. We've got a number of capabilities to help you recover. One thing is, as part of the backup that we take, I didn't have time to dive into that on the demo, but we actually capture all the configuration of the cloud itself. And this looks just like any other workload. You create the policy, you create the schedule, and so you have the ability to capture all that information as well and then use it. Another feature that we've recently added is capturing the entire networking from a Neutron topology perspective. So we will now have the ability to recover routers, networks, subnets, and ports. So all of that layer is going to be included in that as well. And really, this is a conversation, right, with our customers, and so we're open. Thank you for the question. And
maybe just last addition, one of the things we're working to support in OpenStack platform is the ability to run a virtualized control plane. And if you run a virtualized control plane, guess what? This is yet another workload for Trilio.
That's a fantastic example. We've started that conversation already. With the Red Hat hyperconverged configuration, everything is virtualized. Yeah. And from Trilio perspective, it's just a VM. You protect it along with all its data.
So probably what we'll look to see is more requirements from customers. What you would like to see. So please take the opportunity to even add more questions, and we'll try to address it offline after the webinar. And Charlene, if you have any last question.
I don't have any more questions from the audience, with the exception of one on disaster recovery. The question is, I know you touched on disaster recovery before, but can you kind of quickly review that again, what the role of Trilio is in the disaster recovery conversation?
Sure, very good question to end up with. If you think back about what we talked about, the type of things that you need to recover from, and people like to say, I need DR. They don't always think down to the level of what that means. Number one, what's the problem you're protecting from? Number two, what is it that you need in order to recover? And so because you absolutely require the ability to recover from any point in time, DR, disaster recovery, should be thought about as where, not only what, but also where is the disaster? Is it local or is it remote? So for a local disaster that can totally happen, if you have the copy of your data in a different availability zone, right, different fault zone, that's the way for you to recover. Now extend that concept over distance and find a way to replicate, for example, Ceph S3 or Amazon S3 for that matter, or whatever your replication mechanism is. Once you get those points in time over to anywhere else, that gives you the ability to recover. And so disaster recovery with Trilio becomes as easy as I have all these I have all that my data in another location, and it's a process of importing because these are created outside of the local Trilio. So it's a simple process of importing that information, and from that point on, the local or the remote Trilio system just recognizes, and everything that you saw here, how easy it is to restore. Basically, that's how you would restore.
So you're just relying on the replication underneath, basically, in that case.
Exactly. And our approach with everything that we do is we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There are other people that do this better than us, so we try to leverage technology whenever it's available.
Excellent.
All right.
All right.
Great. Well, I don't have any more questions from the audience, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the Q&A session. I do want to thank the audience for submitting questions, and we got some really good ones in, so I'm really really happy about that. I would like to thank our speakers today, Sean Cohen and Boaz Michaely. Thank you both for joining me today. It was a really, really interesting conversation, and I hope that the audience got as much out of it as I did. Just a reminder to the audience that if you missed any or all of the event, it has been recorded. So post-event, you'll be receiving an email that includes a link to the webinar on demand. So you can then access it yourself or share it with your friends or however you want to do it. You can also access the webinar on the devops.com website. You can just click on the webinars section of the website, and we do have an on-demand section there. Also, while you're on devops.com, please feel free to check out all the other webinars that we have, both upcoming and on demand. Hopefully there'll be one or two that pique your interest. Again, Sean and Boaz, thank you both for your time today. I appreciate it, and I would like to thank the audience also for joining me today. Again, this is Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for the event, and I wish you a good day.